Hello, everyone. My name's Laura Villalobos. I'm WiCyS Community Manager, and I would like to welcome you to this WiCyS Strategic Partner webinar with Nestlé on the topic of transitioning into a leadership role in cybersecurity. But before we start, I'd like to introduce you a little bit more about the WiCyS organization. WiCyS is a premium organization with global reach dedicated to bring together women in cyber. Our mission is to recruit, retain, and advance women in cybersecurity. All of our programs and initiatives are made possible by our supporting strategic partners such as Nestlé. We have our professional affiliates, student chapters, equity advocacy committee, mentor mentee program, speaker bureau, job board, and so much more. You can view our training and programs and initiatives on our website at www.wicys.org to learn more about different ways to get involved with the WiCyS community. All of our wonderful initiatives to our strategic partners, our tier one partners being Alchemy, Amazon, Battelle, Bloomberg, Carnegie Mellon University, Software Engineer Institute, Cisco, Fortinet, Google, Lockheed Martin, Meta, Microsoft, Optum, India National Labs, and Sentinel One. Reminder to ask questions throughout the webinar. You can put them in the chat and the presenter will ask them at the end. We have the experts here with us today, and we look forward to hearing from you in the audience. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the WiCyS newsletter at www.wicys.org to stay up to date on any upcoming WiCyS events and trainings. And with us today, we have Michelle Zeigler from Nestlé on the topic of transitioning into leadership role in cybersecurity. Hi, Michelle. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you, Laura. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for joining. It looks like we have a bunch of you out there. And for those of you already putting questions in, thanks so much. And I'm actually going to cover some of those as I go along. So I will do my best to keep track of that and try and answer that during and throughout the webinar here. But my name is Michelle Zeigler. I work with Nestlé IT, and I'm the Director of Security and Compliance for the North America and LATAM zones. I've been asked to kind of cover three basic areas with you guys, and I hope really that at the end that you can inspire and be inspired by much of this, and I love the questions. So I'm going to try to do the best I can to convey a lot of information, but then really open up to questions so that I can help you all better. Appreciate all of you that have joined. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My background has been in cyber for nearly 15 years. And when people ask me about my background, I like to highlight that I don't have a cookie cutter background. And I think that's particularly important in a webinar like this, because I've leveraged that quite extensively throughout my career. Because I think often when people think of cyber, they think of the people in the black hoodies in the basement. And I'm not really a techie person, right? I understand it and I know it and I've leveraged it and I can learn it along with the best. But I think that's particularly important because I like to emphasize that you don't have to be technical to be in our world. And I'll talk a little bit about that. But my background, I grew up in IT, right? So my entire career has been in IT. But as I've gone along the way, I've thought a lot about the kinds of things that I would like to do. So always thinking forward would be one of my key advices that I would bring for you guys. My cyber background has been about 15 years. I've had the wonderful fortune of working for some of the best CISOs in this country, award-winning CISOs. I've had the great fortune of building 2 security departments from scratch. And what that means is organizations, global Fortune 200 organizations that prior to what we know as cyber and information security today, these organizations had nothing. They had no structure, no foundation. So I helped build these departments from scratch, again, with these great CISOs. And what that allowed me to do is really explore and problem solve. And when people think about, what it is that we do in cyber, as I mentioned, they think a lot about the technical side of it. But as a chief of staff for the Israel, I owned, finance, the P&L, the recruitment, the delivery, and a whole host of things that are really what I consider the more esoteric or soft side of security. And through that, being able to, work through all kinds of issues has been how I've been able to not only create opportunity, but build wonderful teams, very high performing teams. And I know many of you are out there supporting me. So thank you for my current and past crews that are supporting me today. But in doing so, I think that what I hope to share with you were the things that I did beyond my role. And that would be the first thing that I would think about is thinking beyond your role. I have what I call the trifecta of skills. So my early IT career, I started out in recruitment. I had the great fortune of building a startup company that outsourced recruiting. So for any of you that understand recruiting, it really helps to know how to hone in on hiring the best people. If you want to do great things, you have to hire great people. And one of my philosophies that my teams always knew is I do think there's a difference between good and great, and we always aspire to be great. So for myself, I tried to set the stage for that in leadership to be able to inspire others by creating a vision, but then also understanding on the team what their strengths and skills were, so that we could all grow and develop together. And that helped lift me up as a leader as well. My experience in recruiting, then I leveraged that to get into outside sales. And all of this is something that I really thought a lot about as I was in my earlier career. And I think I used a lot of my naivete at the time because I never saw myself as different, especially being a woman in IT, which was very different back then. Being a Latina woman, and back then, I know I don't look Latina, so I'll talk a little bit about headwinds and tailwinds here in a few minutes, but I didn't see myself as different, so I kept striving and aspiring. But as I did each of my roles, one of the things that I did was look beyond my role and thought outside of my role, and that would be some of my recommendations for all of you. Meaning when I was in recruitment, I always thought about what are these salespeople needing if they wanted to hire great people. I thought a lot about that and forward thinking in terms of what is it that I like about doing that. And I leveraged those skills, those transferable skills, to then get into outside sales. And as I was supporting my clients, what I liked about that job when I did analysis was problem solving. And while I liked putting the right people in place and solving my clients' problems, I realized that what really thrilled me about that was their end-to-end challenges and how am I helping them solve their everyday business problems. So hopefully you're kind of getting a theme. And then as I was in outside sales, I realized that end-to-end capability was program. And so I got into program management and delivery by design. And it was in doing so was really how I was handpicked by my first CISO because of the work that I was doing and thinking outside of that role and really listening and thinking about risk. And so my journey was one where I would encourage you to always think outside of your role, whatever that looks like. And I even still do today. One of the ways that you could think outside of your role is to really understand your business. Here at Nestlé, we're a pretty complicated business. So after only 1 year, I'm still learning a lot. And I know that, but I continue to ask and probe. But in every other organization I've worked for, one of the key things that I did was to understand the business. And with that, I would try to take what I do and translate that into a single elevator pitch, if you will. Many of you have probably heard of an elevator pitch or an elevator speech. If you don't know what that is, it's being able to articulate something in a really brief period of time. If you ran into an executive or somebody in an elevator and you only had a couple of floors to convey a message, what is it that you would want to say? So I would encourage all of you to do the same. I'm going to give you a couple of examples about how I did that. When I was in outside sales, my elevator speech was one that most people would think, well, what do you do for a living? And most people could say, hey, I sell things, or I sell products, I sell solutions. But for me, my elevator pitch was I help my clients solve their end-to-end problems. And then you get people's attention and then they ask more questions. And that's when you're able to articulate what it is that you do. In cyber, another example is I learned early on, cybersecurity scares some people. and it's really one of those fields that a lot of people don't understand a lot about when I first got into it. Today, I think when we say cybersecurity, because of the headlines and the breaches and all the things that happened with our election, a lot of people understand the order of magnitude, but back when I got into the field, they really didn't. So instead of saying I was in cyber information security, I would highlight that I protected information and assets. And then people would invariably say, well, what does that mean? And I was able to then articulate that I was in information security and then go on. But by then you have their attention and they're listening. So that would be another recommendation of mine, to be able to look at your transferable skills and work with folks that really understand what you do and help them understand what you do. That leads into another recommendation of mine, which is talk to anyone about it that will listen. I know often, especially in the field, being a woman in cybersecurity, we're often accused of talking too much, right? And with that, I think it's important to be able to articulate what it is that we do. And the more that you can and generate curiosity. And one of the lesson learned in my third segment here that I'll talk about, what can you do? I'm always amazed at how often, now that we're starting to create gender balance and more equity in our field, it's called out quite a bit. And while we love that, I notice that there's many times that it's not called out when, there's 3 men in a position versus 3 women. So I'll come to that in a little bit. But when we talk through that, that's something that can really help for all of you. In terms of my background and some of the successes beyond thinking beyond my role, I'm naturally inquisitive, right? I'm a voracious learner. That's how it's been described. And I'm constantly, reading the headlines, learning and understanding how our industry is moving, what's moving in IT, and trying to keep abreast of the trends. And in our field, that's particularly important because, as many of you know, I describe it, IT, we move quickly, right? And I've been in IT my entire career. But IT, we understand planned obsolescence, and we know that we're going to have to replace PCs and things. But, sometimes that's 6 months, a year, a couple of years. Cyber is minutes and hours. So it works very, very differently. So it's important to stay ahead of those things and to continuously learn and challenge yourself for what it is that you want to do next in your career. Those are the things that I focus on. And what I mean by that is, when you're thinking outside of your job, I've always thought about, I could get specific certifications. I do have certifications in change management. I have certifications in Sigma and process. And those are the things that may not initially resonate in a cyber world, but when we look at how we apply cyber in IT and in our business, being able to talk to people about change management and how to put the best people in place through my recruitment background, et cetera, has been particularly helpful. And I think because I've been able to broach those conversations with some knowledge, I've been able to gain credibility, and that credibility has got me some visibility with other executives, and ultimately is the path to how I was selected to come into cyber at the time. I know we have some questions coming in. I have a great one here on the infrastructure applications teams. So I'm gonna hit that at the moment, because one of the other areas in terms of stretching and thinking beyond was, because of my cyber background and the relationship building that I've done, I was actually asked to take on the infrastructure team. And how I did that, Kimberly, was creating roadmaps and helping the infrastructure team understand the symbiotic relationship between what we do. Security permeates everything. So that would be my recommendation there to answer that question, is to really try to look at where the links and the connection is, and help them understand it is a symbiotic relationship. Because what we do, we can have a lot of security, but it's only as secure as the infrastructure that it's built on. So being able to highlight that and continuously talk about that is how I would address your question there. But back to the other areas that I was speaking to in terms of the background. One of the other things, I know we have a lot of focus on EED&I in the world today, but I'm particularly proud of the fact that my teams have always been diverse, and that was with intent, to be able to bring in folks that have diversity of thought, people that thought differently than me. And I think that's super critical as you're growing in your career, because it helps keep your mind open, and it helps you think about the different things and the way that cyber and other areas impact other people. And that would be one of my recommendations for many of you. The second area is around journey and challenges. So there have been many. This has been quite a journey. And for me, the journey has really taken me a lot of different directions. I think that the world of cyber has absolutely changed. But one of the things I've been able to leverage in that journey and change is moving in my career. And that's ultimately what creates opportunity as well. And thinking outside of your role and what is it that you like about the role, I think is key. And those are the things that I've been able to leverage in my journey. It's been amplified through partnerships. I know I've gained network and referrals and different things through some of those activities, which include community involvement. Some of the things that we've done in other areas of our groups has been working with local communities, working with local community colleges, Big Ten colleges, and looking at how can we then deliver the message of cyber and look at how people are coming into the field and kind of structure it in a way that each person can benefit. So that's one of the things that I really like to do. In terms of how to advance your career, one of the things that I've always tried to, I mentioned earlier that, when I was not necessarily a proud thing today, but when I was growing up, maybe it'll show my age a little bit, but being a Latina was not something that people talked about. Today, I embrace it, but back then, I did not. And that's something that today I understand headwinds versus tailwinds. So really recognizing that as I progressed, being able to embrace the things that I think was really important. So for example, what I mean by that is my headwinds were the fact that those are the things that keep you from accelerating, right? I knew some of my headwinds were the fact that I was a woman and I could not change that, right? People would look at me and understand that. But I really didn't see that as a limiter. I always positioned myself to be part of that and not really allow people to minimize that impact. My tailwinds were that people didn't know the other side of me. So I leveraged that and embraced it and embraced the communities that were a part of that and helped bring folks through those communities as well in order to advance in my career. And as such, I diversified my team. And because we had diversity of thought and we had a great vision, we were always able to produce. And through producing is how we got visibility. So for many of you out there, I would think about that, like how can we get better at articulating some of the successes? Many of you may have heard of a program called I Am Remarkable. It was started with Google. We embrace that. But what they talk about is how to highlight your successes without, being braggadocious, which men do very well and very easily. And it's not really viewed the same way. But when women do it, it's viewed differently. So I tried to take a lot of these elements and infuse them into my day-to-day world, but then also infuse them into how am I building and really sharing the success of these high performance teams. The next area is around some of the challenges, right, and what we need to do. I think it's super important to build relationships. I had talked earlier about the communities that we serve internally, understanding the business, but building those relationships, especially from a cyber perspective, is super key because security permeates everything. And I think it's extremely important to be able to understand how to synthesize a lot of what we do for business consumption. And so I spent a lot of time in my career trying to break it down for people. And the more that you can articulate that, the more that you can help people understand what security means to them and why it's important. And I don't mean just a secure culture, but what their individual role in it is. I think you make it easier for people not only to consume it, but to understand potentially how to be a part of it and create interest in it. And I'm sure many of you that are out there today may just be initially curious. Some of you may know already that you want to be in cyber. But initially I did not. I kind of happened into this, but I really love it. When just to give you guys some perspective, when I came into security, again, almost 15 years ago now, we were in the low single digits. Women represented the low single digits. And today, I'm proud to say that we're 25 to 30% of the workforce, which sounds phenomenal, and it absolutely is. And through organizations like WiCyS and these types of partnerships, this is how we've been able to excel, but we have a long way to go. One of the things that I found is interesting is that number hasn't risen a lot in the last couple of years. So I think through all of us talking about cyber, understanding it, and kind of paving the way by being able to synthesize some of this stuff is how we will generate more interest, right? And then understanding where the STEM learning comes from, and helping the folks that are in the STEM community grow in this field in IT and in cyber is super, super important. And all of us that, need to play a role in that and uplift. The relationships that I've built, I think, have been very helpful for me. I was asked to talk a little bit about that because they extend beyond just the relationships on my team. I go back to learning and understanding the business because I tried throughout my career, regardless of what my level was, to build relationships with people at different levels to get them to understand what I do and how I can help. And I think that's particularly critical in cyber because they often don't understand how what we do affects them and why it's important to them. So if you ask anybody in the hall what I do, that's usually what I'm talking about. And I typically try to stay away from many of the acronyms and some of the nomenclature in our world, and focus on what does it mean for them. And I try to take the security terms and translate that into business knowledge so that it will resonate. Because when you can get through to one person, you can get through to multiple people. With that, I also in my career try to develop champions from that. And keep in mind that as I'm doing this, although it's a business impact, it also helped me to extend what I do. It helped to extend my visibility. It helped to extend certainly my knowledge, right? Because then I'm able to build more knowledge of the business and the people that I serve. But all of these things are really just nuggets of ideas. And for me, it was a layering of these things, and it was a rinse and repeat across many companies. But ultimately, as I thought about what I could share today, it was really this layering effect of many different activities that I do and continue to do in order to make sure that there's visibility, not only to our world in cyber, but that ultimately creates visibility for myself as well, and ended up in previous opportunities. Next thing is really to identify coach and mentors and a sponsor. For that, I think it's particularly important. And many folks ask, what's the difference between coach, mentor, sponsor? Your coaches and mentors are the people that are going to help you every day. And there's two dimensions to that, being one yourself and then getting one for yourself, and multiple for yourself if possible, because we all need coaching and mentoring, regardless of my level, regardless of what I've learned. The folks that know me, my crews that are out there today watching, know that I'm continuously learning and figuring out how to infuse learning and new ideas into the team for myself and for everyone, because it's particularly important in our world since it moves so quickly. So coaches and mentors will help you in the moment. They will help you when you have individual challenges. They will help you at times when maybe you're stuck. But a sponsor is someone that you should seek out that looks out for you when you aren't looking out for yourself, is the best way to describe it. And a sponsor should ideally be somebody that's, a higher level than you, that can be on the lookout for opportunities, that can represent you when new opportunities are coming, that can represent you when there's a thought about there might be a new position, different things like that. So definitely seek out coaches, mentors, and a sponsor if you can. And I would try to make it an executive sponsor if possible. I know here at Nestlé, I'm an executive sponsor for a couple of our phenomenal women here on our security and compliance team. And that's what I do. I represent them when they don't even know that I am. So there you go, ladies. The other thing that I like to kind of preach, if you will, is talk to anyone that'll listen. Most people don't understand cyber, and I think talking about it is a wonderful thing. But talk about it in a way that resonates with them, and don't be afraid to talk about the things that sometimes maybe are creating misconceptions, that are changing perceptions. I'm going to give you a great example here at my organization recently, and this is one of the things that I recommend no matter what the situation. But three of us ladies, we happen to have some gender balance across my level in security, and we were asked to do a podcast. And the three of us did do a podcast. And one of the questions within the podcast was highlighting that we were all women and the gender balance. And it seemed somewhat of a benign question, but as we thought about it, one of the things that I highlighted was not just that we're women, but then I proceeded to talk about we're 3 women that are skilled, and what are those skills and why we were the way that we were. So when I say talk about things, that's what I mean. I highly recommend it. It's super easy to sort of gloss past many things when women are successful, especially in our field. But I think it's particularly important to emphasize why we're there, right? We don't talk about that. Yes, we're women. Yes, maybe we can be visible, but there's a reason why we're there. And we don't talk about the skills that got us there. And I think that's the what you need to do. And the right way to promote yourself is to really focus on your accomplishments, right? And the role that you played in accomplishing that. Again, I highly recommend for any of you that are not aware of it, go check out the I Am Remarkable program. We do have this program here at Nestlé, so I was uber proud to have that here when I first got here. It was one of the selling points to know that we embrace that. But Google started the program a long time ago to be able to help women talk about their accomplishments and the things that they do in a positive way that isn't really thought about the same way with men. So do check that out. I think I saw a question or two come along the way. Hopefully I answered the question here around mentors. I did have some great mentors, and I know that many of them helped me to understand where I needed continuous learning. Hopefully your mentors are pointing out your blind spots, right? We all have them. We all have areas of improvement. And I think anyone that can help coach and mentor you should be able to do that in a constructive way. Leading outside of your job, I think that's something that's super important as you grow, right? Many of us, I had mentioned to you all that in my roles as chief of staff, because I had so many functions, but leading outside of that role has been super key. So regardless of what my role was and what my title was, I always viewed myself as a leader for the organization. And I think that's extremely important as a leader in any company. Today, whether I was inside IT or outside IT, I take that job very seriously. So if I see something, it's the old see something, say something, and I try to make sure that I represent what a leader would look like in any case. Often, I had an old boss a long time ago, and one of the things that we always used to say is, a leader is the person that will follow when the smoke alarm goes off and it's dark and no one knows where to go, right? If they follow you in the dark through the smoke with no light, and they do it without fear, that's a leader. But it's also a responsibility. So I've always tried to think about what I do and how I can help people in that regard. And I've had some phenomenal team, and some of my crews have been excellent. And I've been proud to say that I know that they would follow me, but they also did so because they knew I was taking care of them at the same time. But I always take that role very, very seriously. And remember, for many of you, you don't have to have a title to be a leader. That's something that I always emphasize. We are our own brand, and making sure that you can do that, is key. Let's see, I'm going to take a look. Best ways to promote yourself. I think I did do that. And I think that I saw some notes at some of my crews here. So thank you guys. I appreciate that. And I'll get to more of the questions in a second. But in terms of how then we can kind of partner in the things that we do, I go back to our community, find ways of bringing other folks. Some of the areas that I've partnered with are with organizations that are community driven, maybe work with people that are less fortunate, that have less resources. But I take that mentorship and leadership very seriously, and it's ongoing. It's not a one-time thing. I had shared with our recruiting team, one of my more recent ones, we worked with the Year Up program in one of my former companies, and I hired a wonderful, wonderful intern, very, very smart gentleman, and he might even be out there today. But I'm extremely proud to be able to call him a friend today. And just because we haven't worked together for a couple of years doesn't mean that we don't talk. We do talk all the time. He knows he can count on me and call on me at any time. And I still take a lot of pride in supporting him throughout his career. And I know that someday he's going to have everything that he's looking for. And if I could even be just a small, small part of that, I'm extremely proud. So as you all look to mentor and be mentored, remember that those are relationships for life, and you can continuously support each other. And that way, as our field evolves, you're continuously sharing information and keeping up to date as well. And that goes back to the earlier learning that I had referenced. I had mentioned I talk to folks, as many folks that would listen, but also stretch yourself. I think sometimes in the world of cyber, we tend to think of things a little bit more linear. And one of the things that always amazes me, because I've owned these groups that were program and delivery that weren't techie, and finance that wasn't techie, and recruitment and community relations and all of those things, I think that understanding that all of that plays a role in security is super key. And I see a lot of people sometimes that come up to me that are looking to get into the field think that you have to be exceptionally technical, and that's not true. An example I can give is with the community, we used to work with a couple of the local organizations like ISACA and this is Chicago that I'm in. So I know there are chapters otherwise. So here's just a few examples. But we used to work with ISACA and some of the other chapters, and we would put on events. And one of them was a day in the life event. And it blew my mind that even my own team didn't think to highlight the program side of it, because we work with a lot of technical people that really can't articulate the technology exceptionally well. So that's what we did at the time, and really recognizing that our multiple roles in this more esoteric side of security is exceptionally important, because not everybody is going to be technical. But I think sometimes as people look to get into the industry, they think along our CSOC lines, our vulnerability lines, our blue, red, purple teaming lines. And we need those folks, right? They make the world go round in terms of securing environments, but often they can't synthesize this technical speak, or they can't manage a project exceptionally well. We love them, but they can't manage a project exceptionally well or articulate exactly what it is that we're trying to do. So there are no limits. Think about the things that are not just technical within cyber, and think about what you do today that touches cyber and how that touches the business. That's really where I started. When I was able to translate what my role did for the business and extend my role and what I did, that is how I got visibility and noticed in some of these areas. And then before I knew it, I was being asked to talk about certain things. And then, and it just becomes this domino of impact for visibility and for opportunities, and for people to recognize you and think about what you could do and how you could help them. That is one thing that I recommend, that I know I pretty consistently did and still do today, is talk to anybody that will listen, right? Let's see. The next area that I know that the group asked me to talk about is what have I learned, right? So what I've learned is certifications aren't everything. I think that once you get to a certain level in an organization or in a field, you have to think beyond just training and think beyond just technical knowledge. You have to think about what other responsibilities you have, like to the community, to the people that you serve. And being able to extend yourself beyond that is super key. So for me, one of the things that I did, for example, is leverage the Gartner organization and recognize that in order for me to be better at the time, I needed to be around people that were stronger in the knowledge areas that I was weaker, if you will. So I joined Gartner and tapped into a license. So as a director, I was surrounded by CISOs, right? So these were events that were for CISOs by CISOs. And for all of you, I will admit that it was quite intimidating, because I was quite outnumbered, and certainly they were all much higher than me. But to be able to listen to hundreds of CISOs talk about the business impact, and to be able to understand that and know which language that they spoke in, and how they were solving business problems from their perspective really helped accelerate my knowledge and was some of my first directorships, right? So it was something that I had to do with intent. There was a massive financial investment to gain that license, so I had to be creative, talk with my management, and really make a case for my own development. But that's just one example that was costly example, but bottom line is I had to learn how to make a business case early on in my career because one mentoring quote that somebody gave me some time ago is just because it's important to you doesn't mean it's going to be important to everyone else. And so I kind of thought about that for a long time and took that to heart. So still today, and it's been like almost 18 years since I heard that first quote, that's what I kind of do. I apply that. If it's important to me, I figure out a way to articulate a case so that others will listen and make sure that it resonates. And I think that as we think about getting into security, often we have to make the case for growing in a role or doing whatever situation might apply to you. And that's what I would recommend is figure out how to do that early on, because knowing how to build business cases is a skill that will help you later on in your career, regardless of what level you're at. Let's see. I think that for me, as I got into leadership, clearly then the people development I love that. And I've been very fortunate to build some extremely high performing teams. And I know a few of them and noted that they're out there. Thank you guys. But also, I would recommend the folks that are getting into middle management and beyond, think about the people leadership. Is that what you want to do? I know often it sort of feels natural to move into that area, but it's not often required. And especially if you don't want to be a people leader per se, I think many people think that they can do that or they want to do that, and they may or may not. For me, I love it. And so I knew that was the direction that I wanted to go, but it comes with a lot of responsibilities. And but not everyone likes it. And so I would recommend for many of you that are listening, as you advance in your career, think about that, what you do and do not like about certain levels and certain components of different positions. And if not everything appeals to you, then you make a choice to take it in a different direction or figure out how to amass the skills that will be required. Most of the folks that do and have worked for me understand that I take my leadership role extremely seriously. I invest a lot of time in their growth and development. And I think that's extremely important as a leader, especially in cyber, because our industry moves so quickly. We constantly have to help each other, grow and develop for certain. And lastly, I think that in terms of what else I've learned, I think really just that because our industry moves so quickly, we have to be flexible and we have to understand the components of security that affect us. We have to understand that things do move quickly, and how can we apply the skills and what else is necessary, but be looking for the esoteric things that aren't necessarily pure cyber. And that would be what I would have to offer. I'm going to take a look now at the questions here and see what else we have coming in, because I see a lot of them. What tips do you have to keep up to date on cybersecurity? Well, certainly there are a lot of different, there are Krebs on security. There are a lot of different ways that you can, through associations, through people that are in cyber today. There are cyber experts. I would recommend for many of you, and I'm happy to pass along to the WiCyS team, but I stay subscribed to some of the leading cyber experts in their newsletters and things of that nature. There's different literature depending on what it is that you're looking to do. The first thing I would try to do is identify what sources are going to impact the level that you're currently working at and what's going to provide the information. But also be naturally curious, talk to people, affiliate with local organizations and chapters like in cybersecurity, ISACA and others that can help you. But really research and know what it is that they do in order to understand, is it going to help you at the level that you're at, and is it going to help you to accelerate? That would be my recommendation. There was a question about the certifications. I think I had mentioned earlier that my certifications, I did study for the CISSP. I have not attained it. For those of you that are out there that have it, good for you, because it's extremely hard. So I know a lot of the information, but I never quite achieved the certification. For those of you that don't know, there's an extensive learning path that you can take, but to actually take the test, it's quite technical. And so I haven't sat for the test yet. But I recognized early on that in cyber, in order to influence, there are other things that do help me create the influence. So I'm certified in ProSci change management. So from an enterprise change management perspective, knowing how to take these principles and concepts and deliver them into business was key. And how to do that and the skills that it took to do that, I really rely on that more than I do my cyber certification, because that's what my techie guys are for, right? The second thing I think that's helped me quite a bit is my Sigma and Lean Sigma background, because that's process. Often in cyber, we think about, if you're the eyes on glass CSOC people, it's pretty easy, right? Because your job is defined and you know what you have to do to, protect the perimeter and the organization and the assets, and the job is pretty fairly well defined. But for those of us that are not techies in that world, we're the ones that are typically trying to translate. So I leverage a lot of my Sigma background in order to understand how to drive the change and what are some of the processes needed in order to create positive change and to actually drive change into the organization. I do have just a ton of, I mentioned earlier, my first career was in recruitment. So one of the things that I do know is we always have to have great people in our field. And so I take a lot of pride in being able to quickly assess and bring the right folks in, create the right opportunities. So many of my certifications are actually in recruitment from the early days, because that's part of the trifecta of skills that I use between recruiting, sales, and the program side in order to, deliver and really help drive and execute initiatives for cyber in any environment that I've been in, including Nestlé. All right. How do you position yourself for leadership or impact when starting out your IT security career? I think I covered a little bit of that, but I think really just understanding generally what direction you want to go, and making sure that you can work through what it is that the impact that you'd like to make, right? And understanding how to synthesize a lot of that, and understanding which direction you'd like to go, I think is key. And I think ultimately, do you want to be technical or not technical? I think it's, for me, my experience has been knowing and understanding that early has been absolutely key, because I've seen a lot of people get hung up on the technical aspect of cyber, and you absolutely do not have to be technical to be in our field. I will, if you leave with nothing else, please know that, because I think there's a lot of people that get intimidated to try and come into the field in the industry, because they think you have to have that, and you don't. The role that we all play as non-technicians in this world is exceptionally important. It's often underrated. It's often overlooked, but I'm here to tell you that's not true. So for many of you out there that are, maybe thinking twice, don't, jump in with all feet in hand and go after what it is that you're looking for, because there's a role that all of us can play for certain. All right, I'm just scanning the questions here. And Laura, do we have more that are coming through? Hopefully she can hear. Give me just a moment, folks. All right, there was one that came through about the top 3 skills you recommend to work on prior to moving into a manager or director. I think I touched upon that just a little bit, but I think Firstly, as I mentioned, understanding what path you'd like to take. And then is it a people path or is it not a people path? There's a lot of training out there that you can take. Much of it is free. The LinkedIn Learning now today is fabulous because you can take leadership courses. You can study the things that maybe wouldn't have been available to us before, but really understanding how do you want to apply and what is it about the role that thrills you, right? I think often folks that get into cyber can get bored very easily, right? And probably not something that everyone wanted me to say here, but most of the folks that know me know I'm pretty transparent and I kind of tell it like it is. But what I mean by that is there's different elements of security, and the compliance component, I found people either gravitate towards, they love it or they don't. And if they first get into it because they think that's the role that they can play, certain elements of cyber and information security can be somewhat mundane because they're once you develop the policy, then it's reinforcing the policy. And then it's working with the people, and you often feel like a gatekeeper. Or part of my role here at Nestlé with the security and compliance is to make sure that we are meeting our metrics, and when we're not, then I have to go back into the business and the team and say, what are we doing? How do we improve this? And just making sure we keep a pulse on that success. Because we do have organizational goals, as I'm sure many of your organizations do for the people that have joined. But that can get a little boring over time, to be quite candid. But being able to find ways to make it fun, I think, is key. I know myself and others gravitate towards a lot of the training and awareness. And that's kind of a good realm to think about it in, because if you're work within the training and awareness for security, it kind of gets you to think about how is this going to resonate. And those are the things that I would think about in terms of your career and expanding your career. It works the same way. What are the things that I need to do to expand on in order to get noticed, to be visible? Think about some of the transferable skills. Think about the things that you can do to expand certain areas. And then what does that mean for cyber? And if you can start to explain a lot of that for the folks that you're working with, that would be that's huge, right? That helps get you different opportunity. All right. Going into the next questions, because I think we had a couple more that came in. So we have a university student that's focused on cybersecurity. Excellent. And they also have 7 years in IT, and they were hoping the combination of security and research in IT could help them. But how could they apply the leadership roles in cybersecurity and the transition and the steps? I mean, I think that's a phenomenal combination of your background. First of all, congratulations, because the PhD, that's huge. But I think really understanding, as you said, how those things can apply is key. And being able to look at what's the value of the combination of those things, what makes you unique, I think is key. My personal story was when I first, as I mentioned, I didn't with intent necessarily come into security. But once I was in security and I was delivering in the program management, and I had started a couple of security departments for global Fortune 200 companies from scratch, as I networked amongst people across the country, what I realized very quickly is there was probably less than a handful of people that could actually say they'd done that, right? And then I was told that because of my approach to how I could put a programmatic structure in place and hold people accountable, even that didn't necessarily work directly for me, that path and those skills were something that one of my former CISO now leverages in order to hire people. So that was exceptionally flattering to me. And I just did it naturally. But the bottom line is, once I recognized that these were unique skills to me, that would be my recommendation to you. What does that combination mean? And how does that make you unique? And then sell it. Sell it to everyone that will listen. Like I said, talk to anyone that will listen would be what I would recommend. And mostly folks for anyone that knows me, our business can be exceptionally serious, right? We're protecting things, people, some of the world that we're in can get pretty dark. So I try and inject fun into everything that I do. We have to be able to laugh because there's so much seriousness in the world. So I try not to take myself too seriously, and have fun at what you do, right? This stuff can be extremely serious, and we know that bad things happen and things go wrong in the cyber world. So be able to have a release every now and then and have fun at what you're doing and figure out what makes it fun for you, because that's your sustainability, right? So that you don't get bored if you're in the compliance side. Figure out how to apply that and what makes it fun. And there's an element to everything that I do that I try to figure out what's fun about this. And then that's what I tap into. Honestly, I know some of it's my personality, but it's something that I recommend to everyone in my teams. Recognize that I try to have fun in everything that I do. And I think we just had one more new one come in. Healthy work-life balance. Oh, that's an interesting one. Are there ways to move your career forward? Yes, there are. I'm not the best at it. I'll be the first one to admit that. But I think that part of it comes from understanding what your own physical limits are. Each year that any of us age, I think it's exceptionally important to know what drives us, how we keep energy, but more importantly, what zaps our energy, right? In cyber, because it moves so quickly, I notice my brain is constantly going. And the more I got into leadership, is I'm making hundreds and hundreds of decisions a day. In some cases, I didn't want to be asked, what do you want for dinner? Right? I just didn't. So I think understanding our own limits, and moreover, how do we energize and making time for yourself and doing the things that keep you healthy are extremely important. As I got older, vitamins, things like that, whatever it takes. But I think understanding what drives your energy versus what drains your energy is exceptionally important as you move in your career. Many of us know as we advance in our careers, is more responsibility. Often there's greater salaries and things that come with that too. But there's always an upside and a downside to everything, right? So being very pragmatic about how you look at that and knowing that. And then just don't ask my family how good I am at it sometimes. What is unique about cyber that can make change a priority for organizations? Oh, that's a good question. I think that what's unique about cyber is that everybody plays a role. It's everybody, right? And I don't think that most organizations think about that. IT is everywhere. In most organizations, it's an enabler, right? Especially if you have great IT groups like we do here at Nestlé. But not every organization leverages technology, but security permeates everything from the physical security to the digital and logical components of it, to the perimeter, to the you name it, right? So I think that is one of the things that I would try to emphasize that people don't really think about, right? And sometimes I've had to speak even with senior executives to remind them that when you came in here and you drove your vehicle into the parking lot, did you feel safe or not? Right? If the answer is yes, it's because there were multiple components to that. And while on the information and digital side, we may not be looking, depending on your organization, how you have it split, often physical security is separate, but it relies on the digital systems that may scan badges, may do facial recognition, biometrics, things like that. And I think that's how I tend to look at the world. And I tend to try to help people understand that everybody has a role, and what is your role, and the responsibility that you have in it. And having owned the security and awareness function in cyber for probably the last 10 to 12 years, I can tell you that's an area that just doesn't resonate in most companies. And most people don't understand their individual role in it. And so that's how I would ultimately answer that. And security permeates everything in some way, shape, or form. And as such, they need to pay attention to it. And it's up to all of us to get them to understand what does it mean for each of those individuals. Okay. Let's see. I think we hit the end of the questions here. And I appreciate all the wonderful comments from many of you. If I've inspired any of you, that is absolutely my goal. I know we are nearing the time. Anyone that has worked with me and forming my team that are out there will know that usually it's not about me, it's about them. So I'm definitely not accustomed to speaking this long about myself. So it was a little awkward. And there's my little secret. But bottom line is, I hope that I've inspired you, and I hope that all of you will continue to inspire and be inspired, because it's up to each one of us to continue to tell our stories. And I would welcome a contact from anyone out there. I am a WiCyS member, so you can reach me through the membership channel, and I'm happy to have a dialogue or meet, and hopefully I'll even see some of you at our next event.